Hey, good morning and good evening, and whenever you're watching this, welcome to Strong Fathers TV. My name is J. Michael Hall. I'm the president and founder of Strong Fathers, Strong Families, and welcome to Lesson 7. Those of you that have been following us, you've been through Lessons 1 through 6, and just been developing this idea of mom and dad having different strengths, having a different place in the life of the child, coming from different directions and therefore different perspectives. And so we wanted to kind of continue that thought. The last lesson, in lesson 6, we talked about what dads do for a kid's education, which is a big part of our work at Strong Fathers, Strong Families. We do a lot of work with schools and early childhood programs. And so that's really what we've spent, honestly, the last 20 years doing. But as we talked about what is dad's role in education, that's all important stuff and important research that we shared with you. And so if you haven't seen lesson 6, we invite you to go back to that. It's all here on the same channel. But in lesson 7, we want to talk about casting a vision for your child. One of the most important things we do as a father is not providing, the rent and the food and the protection and all those things, which is important. But so many times our job as the guy that represents the outside world to our kids, we have to give them and or set a vision for them, not only for their own sake, but also to help us in our parenting. And that can be pretty dangerous because sometimes our vision can get in the way of our parenting, but that's pretty rare. One of the biggest challenges is when we as parents don't have a vision and we kind of just go through the motions or go through survival. And we're going to talk about some of that here in lesson 7. And so I want you to think about, how do you see your child in the future? What does a future child look like? If you have a 1-year-old, what do they look like at 5? If you have a 5-year-old, they're about to enter kindergarten, or maybe they're in kindergarten. What kind of middle school kid are they going to be? What kind of high school kid are they going to be? What kind of vision do you have? Because if you don't have a vision, you're just going to kind of be wandering through the wilderness, as it were. And even more so, one of the first questions we asked in this series was, what kind of adult do you want your child to become? And that's really what drives all of our parenting, but man, it can get lost in the day-to-day, to say the least. And so we want to do that. So here's what I want to invite you to do. I want to invite you to get out a piece of paper, get out a pen, maybe make notes on your iPad or your phone or wherever you make notes. But get ready, because we've got some work to do today. And we're going to talk about that vision and what that means, what that looks like for us as fathers. And then also, how do we navigate that? Because it could be one of the various things that get us in trouble, as much as it could be one of those things that really helps. All of us have seen parents that think their children ought to be the world's best football player, or the smartest kid in the class. And while those images and or things are not anything bad, to an extent, to have goals and dreams for your kid, a lot of times we've seen it where it really goes in a really bad direction. This says put any questions in chat. We're doing this video live, but put your any questions you may have in there. Also, if you're watching this after the live, put this in, because we can come back and respond to those as well. Also, your questions will also help kind of inform us on the lessons we need to have from here on out. So let me pull up something real quick, just as comments and things that may come in. So as we go, think about developing this vision for your child, and what does that look like? Because just like we talked about before, when we say what kind of adult do you want your child to become, then what we're saying is, we're parenting for the long run. And that can be really hard, because it's this mix of, I have this dream and my kid's going to be this. They're going to be a doctor. They're going to be a minister. They're going to be a lawyer. They're going to be a school teacher. They're going to be the world's best football player. They're going to be, whatever it may be. And then we get stuck on it because the kid's in potty training, and we're like, there's no way you can become prime minister if you can't go to the bathroom by yourself. And it's like, well, hold up, let's do one thing at a time. Or if they're struggling with reading, Or like, there's no way you're ever going to be a doctor if you don't learn to read. Well, they're 3. So relax on that. And at the same time, if we want our children to become successful, we talked last lesson about the fact that we as dads need to read to our kids because of the great educational outcomes that kids have when we do that. So yeah, if I want my kids to be successful in the future, I've got to do work right now. But every challenge our kid has right now does not mean they're not going to, meet whatever goals we may have in the future. I think I told you in one of the lessons about the fact that my dad said I would never get married because the way I ate spaghetti when I was 12. Well, I had to learn once I started liking girls, I might learn how to eat spaghetti, or I might want to learn how to have some manners and use utensils and those things. So when we talk about parenting for the long run, a lot of times we can get lost in that because we tend to parent from one of several perspectives. The first one being survival. You have all these dreams about this baby coming into your world. You've done all this preparation. Mom's gone to the doctor. You've gone to the doctor with her. You've got a nursery set up, or people have given you a shower and great gifts. And you've got all these things. You prepared the room. You prepared the bed. You've been thinking about names. And it's going to be such a glorious time. And then the baby comes here, and there's these 2 or 3 days of fatigue, but also euphoria. And then somewhere it sets in. And I usually say about the second week, where you just haven't had any sleep in 14, 15 days, mothers and mother-in-laws have now left the scene for a while to let mom and dad bond with the child. You have less help around. And I say it usually comes in the middle of the night. And all of a sudden, it hits you like a freight train. What have we done? Because all the beauty and all the glory and all the things is fine, but all of a sudden, I'm not getting any sleep. This kid's not doing what I ask him or her to do. And now I just got to survive. And survival is really almost any day of parenting. I just got to get up. I got to go to work. I got to get these kids ready. I got to get these kids fed. Kids want to eat like every day. Like they don't take a day off. They don't take a day off from diapers. They don't take a day off from bottles. They don't take a day off. Ask a mom who's breastfeeding if a kid ever takes a day off. And so there's a time when we do, and I mean, all of us go through this, where we parent from survival. The challenge is sometimes we never get out of that. If we're just trying to make it day to day and we don't think about, okay, so we will have to wean this child sooner or later. So what are we doing to do that? Or this child is going to learn to walk, or this child is going to learn to do that. So we might want to make sure the house is baby proof, so we're not always just running around trying to survive. We may want to read to our child so that when they get in school, it's not like they struggle every minute of the day with everything they're learning, because that's what keeps us in for survival mode. And if we only go from this perspective, which is what we do at any given time as a parent, we really lose the opportunity to do better things for ourselves and our kids. We also parent from a place of compliance. And what I mean by that is instead of raising a child that we discipline, and discipline not meaning punishment, but discipline meaning, we're going to get them a good bedtime. And it takes a while to get them a good bedtime or get them a good bedtime routine, because going back to survival, I just want you to go to bed so I can get some sleep. But if we don't set certain habits in place, if we don't do the hard work up front to get our children in kind of the mindset and habits of bedtime, then they don't do a good job of going to bed, and we're always in survival mode. But just above survival mode is just go to bed, right? Like we haven't necessarily set these great patterns or habits. The kid has not necessarily learned how to self-soothe as a child, which is really important for kids to put themselves to sleep. But we're just do what I say. Just do what I'm asking you to do. And that can be when they're babies. That can definitely be when they're teenagers. And raising teenagers is a great opportunity to show them discipline. And I don't mean punishment. I mean to train them, because they've got great brains. And what's getting in the way of their compliance is their great brain. They're like, this doesn't make sense to me anymore. Or you've been my hero as a parent for the last 10 to 11 years, and now as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, even though I think I know everything, I do know, and I begin to realize you're fallible and you make a lot of mistakes, and so why should I listen to somebody that is so messed up? And you're like, you have no idea what it takes to be this messed up as an adult. You have no idea what it takes to be less messed up than I am. I'm not half as messed up as you think I could be. But we want to get kids in compliance. Just do what I say. Just do, whatever. And so that's where you see people, yelling at their children in the mall, in the stores, in the street, on public transit, wherever you may be, because the kids have not been taught necessarily how to navigate that or how to behave in those situations. And I'm not saying that your kids are going to be perfect all the time, but if we're always just trying to get them to do what we say instead of teaching them a certain way, then we're always going to be just above survival and really just kind of gritting our teeth trying to get through the day, get through the week. Just do your homework. Well, do you want them to do it well or just do it? Just do it, right? And then we also go from survival to compliance to accomplishment, right? In other words, okay, now I want you to do everything I tell you to do, but now that you're doing it, I want you to do those things so that you will be the best student, or you'll be a great athlete, or you'll be, nothing wrong with being a good student, a good athlete, a model citizen, a decent human being, as we've talked about in other lessons. But we then begin to parent for our kid to do great things, and that can be for their own good. That doesn't mean that it's not altruistic sometimes, but sometimes it's just for us as parents. We're thinking if we can just get them to accomplish something, then I can feel better about myself as a parent. But your children can accomplish great things, whether it be in school, whether it be in athletics, whether it be in music, in the arts. They can be the best violin player ever. They can be a great piano player, right? That's an accomplishment. But what happens when those accomplishments don't mean as much, or when they become adults and it's their accomplishment, but now it's theirs and not yours as a parent? Like, you can always be proud of your child, but sooner or later they start doing things for themselves. And if they don't want to accomplish the things you want them to accomplish, then you've got a point. Now, here's that next level of independence, right? You see the difference between survival, compliance, accomplishment, and independence? Independence is where we want them to go. We want them to be able to take care of themselves. We want them to be able to navigate the world in which they are going. We want them to get an education. We want them to find some sort of career. And I don't even care about career because I've had, I don't know how many careers. I've done so many different things, taken so many different paths. But I want them to make a living, right? I've got two sons, 29 and 24, and they're doing different things, and they kind of, look to me about how I feel. And I'm very proud of both of them, and I think they're doing good things for them. But the bottom line is they're paying their own bills and they're doing their thing. And so part of me as a parent has to not worry about what they're accomplishing, right? Like my son's a teacher. My youngest son was doing marketing, and now he's doing kind of a lot of side gigs to just make a living because of COVID and everything else. But he's doing it in great fashion, and he's kind of finding his way, but he's finding his way on his own. He's very independent. I'm very proud of that. So he says, what is he doing? I'm like, he's making it. Well, what is he doing? And people say, is it a career? It doesn't matter. He's paying his own bills. He's 24 years old. He's not married, doesn't have kids. Man, go do it. Whatever you need to do. Go find things. Go do things. Go, take risk. All those things. Because he's independent. And that's what I wanted him to get to. That's what I want him to do. And that's way past survival, right? Like, I don't want him to keep coming back to me for money because he barely knows how to get by. He knows how to get by on very little because he learned to do that in college. Drove me crazy. I'm like, you need to get more money. You need to make more money. He's like, I'm fine. And it wouldn't be the way I'd want to do it, but he did fine. He survived it. He got through college. He's making it on his own. All those good things. And so we want our kids to become independent. And then there's this point, there's this point where we go from, hang on, let me get back to where we were. That's the only problem with going live, right? So we go from independence, and then, we've got to get to the next step of where we're raising kids through this phase. And there's nothing wrong in any given day of parenting with survival, by survival, or parenting through compliance, and getting them to accomplish things. But this is not how we can parent all the time. And I see a lot of parents get stuck in one mode or the other, and that's all they've got, right? That's all they know to do, or they haven't found a way to get to the next level. So we tend to parent from one of these perspectives, and this is, those are those perspectives where we really have those challenges. And of these components, this is kind of our direction in parenting unless we set another direction. So let's talk about the developmental model that we've been using, right? So I talked about the fact that we think, I'm going to go this way with our picture here. We think development, our kids just grow like this, right? They're just going to keep going and growing, and then when they don't quite do that, we're like, what's wrong with me as a parent? What's wrong with my child? Nothing. And so what happens in true development with kids is they grow, they plateau, and then we have this disturbance. And that's when we go, what just happened? I had a baby. They didn't sleep very well because they were a baby. And then they started sleeping through the night. And we're like, oh, okay, we survived it. Now they're complying and going to bed. Now we're accomplished because, they're doing this thing. But here's the thing. You're going towards independence. And then all of a sudden they start pulling up on the couch. They start pulling up on the table. They start doing more than crawling. They're not quite walking yet, or they start to walk. And because they can pull up, their perspective changes. Because they're learning how to walk, their world changes because their perspective changes. And then all of a sudden, a kid that you would normally put to bed and would go to sleep is like, no, look, dude, I can pull up and look outside the bed. I might be able to get out of the bed. And all of a sudden, now that I have some independence, now that I have a way to pull up and get out of this thing, or just think about all the things that have been coming at me all the time. I didn't know I was taller than a dog until I pulled up on the couch. And now I realize I'm as tall as a dog. Had no idea because the dog was over the top of me. Right? So their perspective begins to change. Same thing, we potty train our kids. And it takes a long time, or it takes a while, or it takes a minute. And then all of a sudden, they're doing well. And then it may be growth. It may be trauma. It may be just them going, you know what? I don't like it that I now go to the bathroom by myself and I don't have my parents around. I really liked my mom or dad sitting in the bathroom with me while I was learning this. And so if I quit learning, they'll have to come back in the bathroom. And we're like, what happened? We broke our child. No, there's this disturbance. And so what happens all through development, growth, plateau, disturbance. And these could be short term and these could be long term. There's really kind of a whole long growth status when you think about our kids going into, let's say, first grade, second grade, third grade. Kind of the first through fifth grade, even though they're growing, they're making these micro growths and plateaus. As a person, they're kind of the same person for a while, right? Elementary is a really interesting time where they, are just kind of growing. And you see a little bit of a disturbance, but they're really just kind of growing. They may have some challenges that they do plateau and disturbance. But this is kind of one of those really kind of nice times sometimes, depending on your kid, where they just kind of grow. You get to enjoy them. You get to, and then as they get older, you get to have more fun, or they get more responsibilities. They get to help more. That's really fun for us. And then all of a sudden they get to become a preteen or a teenager, and then we're like, what happened? Because they're growing and plateauing like every 5 minutes, every day, every hour, right? They're doing all of these things in a very rapid fashion. And so that's another challenge of our kids becoming teenagers is, we thought we were just growing, and then where did all these disturbances come from? Well, because this is what development looks like. And so when we look at, okay, so how do I deal with this? Well, you have to understand, if you can look at this model, you're going to freak out just a little less. Right? It's not that the disturbances don't bug you. It's not that the disturbances don't wear you out. It's not that it doesn't take work or patience or really, to stay. It just takes work because the child is working through things. And then if we're doing our job as a parent, we should be helping them work through those things. And so this is very natural, but that doesn't mean it's easy. But it can be easier when you know what you're dealing with, instead of thinking, oh, this kid's crazy, this kid's done, they're broke, they're being rebellious, they're being defiant. They may not be. And part of their defiance may be okay. Not that you let it happen, not that you don't address it, but you don't think all of a sudden your child has lost their moral compass, right? Or all of a sudden my child is going to become a criminal or a horrible child because they're starting to push back. If you want your child to be independent, you've got to deal with pushback. That could be when they're 12. That can be when they're 20. And there can be some real severe times in the middle of that. But pushback is okay, right? I have friends that have kids, and I'll take particularly the examples of daughters. And their daughters are beyond what we would call sassy, right? I've got nieces, they're beyond sassy. And they give me all kind of hassle. But here's what I know. As they become adults, they can handle themselves. Not only physically, because they're all athletic. I wouldn't mess with them. But also they can handle themselves because they have a sense of self. They have a sense of purpose. And because of that, they kind of give it back to me as their old mean uncle. Well, you would say, well, they're kind of sassy, or they're kind of, they have a smart mouth, and they're never really disrespectful. I mean, I think they're disrespectful because they don't, think I'm the best uncle ever. But as we look at that, we're like, well, this kid just he questions my authority. Well, yeah, and we've got to deal with that, and we've got to establish our authority and say, no, this is my house. These are my rules. Those are things they need to live by. But there's nothing wrong with kids questioning things. There's nothing wrong with kids pushing back. There's not even anything wrong with kids testing boundaries if they don't, test them past what they should at that age, or however they develop that way. But we get that and we think, well, now my kid's broke, or they're not going to become what I think they're going to become. No, because they're pushing back, because they may be a little bit defiant, a little bit rebellious. And again, I'm going back to a little bit in the fact that they're not becoming, a huge hassle, but it's something we deal with and we see it in them. That's how they sometimes become very successful adults. There is an idea that being compliant can help you get along in your company. Being compliant can help you get along in society. But also, we don't see great change in leadership unless somebody pushes the envelope. So we want to train our kids to do that, particularly in a good way. And so we've got to recognize this pattern of growth, plateau, disturbance as something that's good, even though it's something that's not always that fun. So there was a Parenthood movie several years ago now with Steve Martin, and it was a great movie, just talking about all the struggles, and it ends with saying parenting is like a roller coaster, and sometimes you just have to ride. That's what this is right here. This is that roller coaster. And so you recognize the pattern, and you're like, oh, okay, so this is what happens when you're on the roller coaster. You can't have the ups without the downs. You can't pick up speed in your parenting and your growth unless you take some dips, unless you go to unless you climb the work of climbing the hill. And then there's this coasting, and then there's the next hill, and and it's all that pattern. But parenting is definitely that roller coaster. And if you can recognize the pattern, then you're going to be better. So frustration is okay. As you learn this, shock should really be minimal. And the fact that your kid is, when you get a teenager, if you haven't ever been a teenager, how'd you do that? You've been a teenager, you know teenagers, you've seen teenagers. So why are you surprised when your teenager starts acting like a teenager? You see people with 2-year-olds that become very defiant, and they learn the power of no. They learn that they have something to say about it. So that's where they start throwing fits. And we call it the terrible twos. And we're like, what's wrong? They're 2. Well, I know. Okay, but yeah, I know you thought you were going to raise the perfect child, but guess what? They're 2. This is what they're supposed to do. So frustration's okay. Shock should be minimal. Patience, though, is a must. And so we've got to be working within this pattern, right? So here's the deal. We're seeing this growth, right? This is how our kid's going. And then we say, oh, well, we're going up, but we're going down. And then somewhere we get in there, like where our kid's a teenager, and, we're like, oh, look, I know, okay, we're kind of on the roller coaster. And I see it, and then all of a sudden our kid it's like, where'd the kid go? They just took this nosedive because we're wondering what it is. But, so we have this long-term goal. So let's talk about a shopping exercise. 4 sentences about what you kind of hope to say to your kid, what you hope to do. So in the shopping exercises, what are you looking for out of your kid? What do you hope to get? And so those are things that, this is what we can hope to say about this. So the shopping exercise, I always talk about the story of Samson in the Bible. And Samson was promised by God to be this hero that was going to save his people. And the angel came to his parents and said, look, this is going to be a special child. And the dad even says, what are the rules for raising this kid? And they gave him a specific set of rules, right? And so if you know the story of Samson, he made every wrong decision possible. And from the theological side, you've got to say, okay, was that God's plan, or did God just use a guy that was really kind of a moron? Well, I think it's both. But you've got to think about, what was it like to be Samson's parents? And I say shopping exercise. So we go grocery shopping. We go to the store, we go to the mall. You're shopping. and you see some old friends and they ask you, how's your kids? Well, what are those things you hope to say? Right? Like Samson's parents were like, well, he met this girl. She was a Philistine. She wasn't one of us. She didn't have the same kind of background. And he got in lots of trouble. They had a fight at the engagement party, and then he lost a bet with her family, and that made him mad. So he went to pay his debt. He went and killed 1,000 people, just a little thing. And so it's like all the things that Samson did, you're like, that's not really what I want to talk about when they ask me my kid. So what are things, if somebody's to ask you in the future, how's your kid doing? What are those sentences that you hope to say? They got this education, they're in this relationship, they built this business, they've done this thing or that thing. And so working within the pattern, we've got to talk about long-term goals of what do you hope to say about your children one of these days to your friends, right? And so when we talk about that dream, how we dream about what our kids are going to do, we've got to have goals, because a goal is a dream with a deadline. And so we've got to have dreams, but we've got to put some structure to it. We need to know where we're going, but we're not there yet, right? So as we go into this, we have to understand, so this is where I want my kid to be. Well, they're not going to be there when they're 3. They're not going to be there when they're 13. There's a good chance they're not going to be there unless you just have a goal of having a college graduate. They're not going to be there when they're 23. That may be the only thing they've accomplished to that point, which would be great, but it depends on what your goals are. And so as we look at that, know that this is all part of the process. So many times we look at our kids and we're like, they're never going to do this. Yeah, they will, over time, with your help and with your vision. And so you've got this vision. Well, that doesn't matter unless you have, without intentional action steps. So, parents that want their children to become, let's say, great athletes or great students or whatever. Well, if you want your child to become a doctor, lawyer, top student, whatever it may be, then what are you going to do about it right now? And we talked about reading to our children as babies, making sure they have books in the home to become just smart. The more they read, the smarter they are. The more they read, the smarter they can become. I'm a huge literacy, champion. I hope. Read to our kids. Our kids have to learn to read. So if we don't do that, we can't just turn around and hope when they get in high school that somehow they're making it, right? My wife is a teacher, and she does reading intervention at the secondary level. And these kids have all the ability, but they didn't have people when they were young help them read. And you can see it in them because they really struggle because it's not something natural. So these are the steps on the map for me to go from the airport in Singapore to downtown Singapore to city center. Well, I can't just fly to the airport and go, okay, I got to know what the steps are to take to get where we want to go. So with our kids, what are the steps that we need to take? And again, we've got to go with that roller coaster. We've got to go with their direction. But let's talk about for a minute developing a vision for your child. So we have this form. It's actually there at strongfathers.net vision. We developed this with the Family Enrichment Society in Singapore. But I've used this. The one you're going to get from here has that logo on it, but I've used this exercise, the last 20 years. But think about the child that you now have. And do it for each child. If you've got 3 kids, you need to do one of these for each kid because those things are going to change. So look what we have here. So where will your child be in 1 year? Like, how old are they going to be? Well, they're going to be 5 or they're going to be 7. Well, what grade are they going to be in? They're going to be going into grade 1 or grade 2. Where are they going to be? They're going to be at a public school. They're going to be at a private school. They're going to be whatever. If you have an 18-year-old that's now finishing high school, next year they're going to be at university, or that could be where they're at. They're going to be 19. They're going to be out of school, and we hope they're at university. What university is it going to be, right? Or if they're going to do a vocational training, where are they going to get that training? Where are they going to apprentice? Where are they going to do those things? So in a year, what activities will my child be involved in? So my child's going to be a first grader. Well, have we already started piano lessons, or do we plan to start piano lessons? Or where are we with our faith formation? Are they going to be going to classes? Are they going to be doing certain things within our church and our faith group? So where are they going to be? What activities will my child be involved in? They're going to be in a select football team, right? They're going to be training for the Olympics. I don't know where your kid's going to be, but you need to know in a year, where do we hope for them to be? Where do we think? What will they be doing this time next year? And then what are some of the challenges they'll most likely be facing? Well, if we're starting piano lessons, we know we're going to have to deal with some frustration because learning is hard. And we've got to be patient with them, but we've also got to be diligent and intentional. They've got to make those lessons every day or every week. We've got to make sure they have a place to practice at home. We got to be parents that say, that's what we're going to do. And so what are some of the challenges they're going to be facing? If they're in university, they're going to be dealing with being in a new place. They're going to be dealing with a new schedule. They're going to be dealing with academic challenges. So what will they need from you as a father at this time in their life? If they're learning piano, I can't play the piano. My children took piano lessons, so I just took them and picked them up because I couldn't help them at all. I could say, good job, that sounds great. Or I don't know what that means, but you need to do some more work. But I needed to know where I was going to be with that. So what will they need from you as a father in their life, right? And then where will your influence be? What will you be able to control at this time? So take the first grader. If they're going to piano lessons, well, you can control that they're going to go every day. They're going to go every week, that you're taking them and picking them up, that they have you can control whether they do or don't have a place, to practice, whether it be a keyboard with earphones, which is always a great idea, or maybe a grand piano in your house. I don't know what your situation is. But those are things you can control. What are things you cannot control? You can't control who they sit by in school. You can't control how the piano teacher approaches it because they're the piano teacher, right? You can't control how they're going to be coached. You can't control those certain things. You can control what school they go to, but there's certain things within their class and their peers that you're not going to have any control over. So this is that first year. Where are they going to be in a year? Well, okay, that's not a bad practice to do all the time, but now if you're going to do things intentionally, think about this. Where are they going to be in 5 years? Where are they going to be in 10 years? Where are they going to be in 15 years? Where are they going to be in 20 years? And so what we've got to do is we've got to go, let's say, to that 20th year, and we've got to do some reverse engineering. If they're going to be a world-class concert pianist, then we probably should have started piano lessons about the age of 2, right? Or we've got to start getting very serious about it at the age of 5. But what do we want, or if we want them to be in university, or if we want them to do this or that, then we've got, what do we do now? What should we do a year from the time they become a doctor, a year from the time they go to college, a year from the time they become whatever they're going to become, and then we've got to start running that back. Well, I want them to be a great athlete, or let's talk about real important stuff. Honestly, we keep throwing this stuff out that I'm not necessarily that comfortable with. I want them to be a great human being. I want them to be a very decent person. Well, one of those things is for them to serve their fellow man as adults, they've got to learn to do that as kids. So how does a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old learn to serve? Not only do they learn how to do chores in the house, but they learn how to help people in other programs, on the street. They learn how to be kind to their friends. They learn how to be a leader in school. So what is to be this really compassionate, decent adult? What do we need to be doing right now, right? Like, we can't raise up selfish kids and expect them not to be selfish as adults. So what do we want them to be? And then what does that look like? So from that, so I've got a 7-year-old. And they're kind of selfish because 7-year-olds are kind of selfish. They're just trying to protect themselves. So part of my job on my annual goals is to get them to be more independent, to get them to be less scared, because if they're less scared, they're more likely to be more giving, right? Those of us that have trouble with giving is because we have fear. Any of us, and we all have fear, by the way, and we all struggle with our giving, but one of the biggest challenges is not so much selfishness, but am I going to give too much of myself and then be taken advantage of, or, whatever. I don't want to look dumb. And so those are fears that keep us from doing some of the things. So what are the annual goals? If I want my child to be a great student, if I want my child to be a great athlete, if I want my child to be a decent human being, what are we going to do this year? Well, we're going to do a service project. What does a service project look like for a 6-year-old? We're going to make cards with our own crafts and hands and Crayolas, and we're going to send them to some older people that we know in convalescent centers, or we're going to send them to family members that we can't see because of a pandemic. But there's things that a 5, 6, and 7-year-old can do that can be of great service, particularly to older people, because they love it. And what does that show them? That shows your child look, number one, you can do this. And when you do it, you get a great result. Not that you do everything for praise, but this is that first step. And then what are we doing? Well, we're going to go take care of somebody's courtyard. We're going to go paint somebody's house. We're going to go do these things. So if we're talking about reverse engineering a great human being, we've got to model that to them all through their different stages, to the point where, okay, now you're 15. Well, I don't have to take you in to go clean a courtyard. I've shown you how to do that for the older lady down the street or our family members. I've showed you how to paint, so you and your friends can actually go paint stuff. Or we can guide you while you guys do the project. So what are your annual goals for that? They're going to practice their piano every day. They're going to do a service project every month. We're going to find new and different ways to help them serve any different way in their community. And so those are annual goals. This is what we're going to do as a family. This is what this kid's going to do. So what does that mean? Quarterly. Like, we can't say we're going to do something nice for somebody this year, and then we get to December 27th and go, I got 4 days. What are you going to do every 3 months, within every 3 months, that you're going to do that? Or if they are if they're going to be an athlete, if they're going to be a musician, if they're going to be a great student, what do their grades look like? What do their study habits look like? You know, if we've got a small child, let's see what we can do to get them to have a good bedtime habit. Well, we can't wait a year. So let's say, okay, by the end of this month, we at least have them laying in bed for an hour before they get up, right? Whatever your goal is, that goes back to survival, but it's still a goal. So where do we want our kid to be this time next year? So what does that mean for the goals that we have? What does that mean for this quarter? What does that mean for this month? What does that mean for this week? And I go back to the week because so many times, and we're just now past the point, we're in January of 2021 making this video. And because, I'm hoping people are watching it in 10 years. But, so we get into the first of the new year, we set these resolutions, and I'm going to do this every day. I'm going to work out every day. I'm going to exercise every day. I'm going to eat healthy every day. And we don't. But if we would step back a minute and say, you know what, I'm going to make sure that I eat more healthy meals in a week than I eat not healthy meals in a week, or that I'm going to work out a majority, 3 out of the 5 days, 3 out of the 7 days, 4 out of whatever my goal is, I'm going to do 2 days a week of exercise to get started. In next quarter, I'm going to move it to 4. But right now, I'm going to start with some sanity, and I'm going to do that because I'm going to develop those habits, right? And so what am I doing this month with my kids? Well, we're going to go check out books from the library. We're going to send cards to, some older folks. We're going to send cards to those people, those first responders, those people that are serving us during this pandemic, whatever it may be. And we're going to do that once a week. We're going to do that this month. We're going to make sure we're accomplishing those things. And so you've got to set those goals of what am I doing? Where do I want to be in a year from now? So we've got annual goals. And, what are those? And then if I've got these annual goals, then like for a student, what am I going to accomplish this semester? And, and so because I'm going to accomplish something, let's say this semester, what are my monthly goals? Like I've got to read X amount of pages. Excuse me. I've got to read X amount of pages. I've got to make sure that I'm on track with my projects because I've got a semester project each month. I've got to make sure I'm hitting certain milestones. And that's even for our younger kids. Our younger kids are doing so many project-based things. Sometimes we got to do that. So this week we need to make sure we take care of this, right? So annual goals, semester goals, monthly goals, weekly goals. And then what does that look like for us, meaning from the day to day? So we say we're going to work out 4 times a week. Does that mean we're going to work out the last 4 days because we didn't do anything the first 3 days? So what are your daily habits? Well, my daily habits are I'm going to look at my schedule and when can I build a workout in? Right, my daily habits are I'm going to read every day. Let's talk about your kids for a minute. If you want them to be great students, they need to be reading daily. Your kids come home and you say, what kind of homework do you have? And they say, I don't have any, and which is not always true. And sometimes it is. It's gotten to be where a lot of times at school, they're doing most of their work at school. They have minimal homework compared to what, they used to have. But even if they don't have any homework, our kids should be reading every day. They're on a screen every day. They have those daily habits. There's no reason so you can't put everything away and say, okay, for the next 30 minutes, you're going to read. Well, I have homework. Okay, you're going to do your homework, and then after that, you're going to read for 30 minutes. So no matter what, you're going to read for 30 minutes. Or if they're a younger child, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it may be. Or you're going to set the daily habit of reading to them so that when they become a reader, then they're going to feel better about doing that themselves. So what are the daily habits in your family that you may need to be setting? So if I want my child to be a concert pianist, or if I want them to be able to play a piece of music in a year from now, because that's what a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 19-year-old should do, then that's my annual goal. I want them to be able to master this piece of music. I want them to master this athletic skill. I want them to master this academic goal, right? They're going to learn a certain language. They're going to learn calculus. We want them to master something, right? And so what's our annual goal? That means what are we going to do this semester? What do we should be doing each month? What are we going to do this week to make sure that happens? And so that means what do our daily habits look like? Concert pianist needs to practice every day, right? A great athlete needs to practice something every day. So how do these goals and habits, how do they come into our parenting? How do they serve us and our kids as parents? And so how do the goals and habits serve your kid? Well, first off, it gives them some structure, but we've got to be careful because so many times it's our structure, not their structure, right? If your kid does not want to be a concert pianist, it doesn't matter what kind of goals you set. And there's a time when you have to get to a point and we say, okay, do you personally want to be a concert pianist? Most likely, if we're doing that, we brought them up to think that's their goal. And if that's what they want to do, then they're going to say, yeah, okay, well, if you want to be a concert pianist, we got to practice every day. If you want to be a really good student, we got to make sure that we're getting our homework done every day. We got to make sure that we're reading every day. We've got to make sure we're doing this. So they serve our kids not only because we're teaching habits, but we're also teaching them that nothing happens without a plan or a goal. And yeah, you can get crazy with lists. You can get all Tiger Mom on stuff, Tiger Dad, and say, you got to do this. But how do these things serve your kid now? And then, just like we said, how does that serve our kids in the future? Because for our kid to wake up one day and realize that we have raised a decent human being, well, we had to do things in the past that do that. Like my kids do not think too much of serving others because they were brought up doing that. Are they the greatest servants ever? No. Do they have challenges? Yeah. No. Not all of us want to get up every morning and go help somebody. But when it comes down to it, I know they'll do it, and I've seen them do it. Why? Because they were taught to do that. How were they taught to do that? Because I was taught to do that. And that was something very easy that I was passing on, is if somebody needs to move, and we go do it. Well, we provide the muscle because moving is horrible, right? It's a traumatic event to take all your belongings and put them from one place to another. So yeah, they learned how to do that because I said, come on, we're going to go do that. So what are our monthly goals? What are our weekly goals? What kind of daily routines and habits are we setting for our kids? And so let's go back to that SMART goal, because we can get out of whack with this. We can get overboard with this. But many of you guys in your work and your training, corporate training and everything, you've seen this. So when we talk about what are SMART goals, first off, they've got to be specific. Like, I'm going to learn to master this piece of music. I'm going to learn to master this certain thing. It's got to be measurable. Well, what does that mean? Well, then let's go back to the music. I'm going to master this piece. Well, who's going to tell me that I mastered it? Well, it's got to be measurable. Then I'm going to master this piece according to my teacher, a professor, certain standards. I'm gonna get a white belt, brown. Well, I'm gonna get you a white belt, a brown belt, a purple belt, a blue belt, a green belt, a red belt, a black belt, whatever belt you're looking to get. That's that measurable piece, right? And so this is my specific goal. This is how I'm going to measure it. I have to make sure it's achievable. In other words, what is it that I'm wanting to do? And, so can your child become a world-class concert pianist at the age of 5? Probably not. There are some prodigies out there, but raising prodigies is really not any of our business. It's the prodigies' business. They just kind of take to it. But is it achievable? Well, yeah, a child this age can master this skill, whether it be music, whether it be a child this age can learn how to sweep the house on their own. A child this age can learn to self-soothe and put themselves to sleep as a 2-year-old. A child this age, is it achievable? Yeah, by the time they're at the end of their 4th year, they should be potty trained or could be potty trained. It is achievable. And then is it realistic? Like, in other words, if I want my child to become this great concert pianist, do we have the money and time to do that? That takes a big financial and time commitment. So is it realistic? Like, my kids can do a lot of great things. I did not have the capacity to raise a world-class concert pianist. If it had been their goal, we might have found it, but I didn't have the means. It wasn't realistic for us to do that. We live out in the country, and we don't have those kind of resources. You may not have those kind of resources. So what's realistic for your child to be able to do? And then, is it timely? In other words, what are we trying to get to so that our child can do these things? And so by using this, instead of just yelling at our child because they're, still playing these basic music pieces, or they're still learning how to, kick the ball, so they're not all of a sudden a world-class football player. Well, what's achievable and what's realistic for a child this age? A child this age should be able to kick the ball with their left foot and their right foot. A child this age should be able to lead the ball in front of them and do that. A child this age should be able to dribble with their feet and with their knees and with their chest. A child this age should be able to do these drills because these are developmentally appropriate for a child to do that. A child this age should be able to play this piece of music if they practiced enough. A child this age should be able to do calculus because they've done all the prerequisites to get to calculus. A child this age should be able to navigate their way across the city by themselves on public transit because we've taken them so many times and they're responsible enough to do that, and they're resourceful enough to take care of themselves while they're doing that. A 5-year-old probably shouldn't do that. 15-year-old should be able to do that. If a 15-year-old can't navigate themselves across the city, we've got to do something different. Right? And so those are things that we've got to look at. And I understand you may be concerned about those things, but what is achievable, what's realistic, what's timely? And so those are the kind of things we've got to look at as we begin to set goals for our kids. And so remember, here at the bottom, strongfathers.net/vision will get you to the goal sheet, which takes you from year 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, all those different things. And so I really invite you to kind of take that on and look at it. So I've done this exercise in my fatherhood groups. And it is very sobering to think about, okay, well, in a year from now, my kid's going to be a senior in high school. From a year from now, my kid's about ready to drive. A year from now, my kid's going to be entering school in elementary. Well, that changes a lot of things for you as a parent, particularly as a father, right? So what am I going to do between now and then to get them ready? What will they be doing in a year from now so that I need to do that? I'll give you an example. I did the same exercise and realized that in 2 years, my oldest child was going to go to college. I also realized I did not save up a bunch of money for college. One of the reasons that I didn't do that in growing my own business was I was trying to grow my own business, but I didn't want my business to overtake what I was doing with my family. Like, I had lots of opportunity to travel more, but I always say it didn't mean no good to go around talking about being a good father if I wasn't actually a good father to my own kids. Right? Not only would they see the hypocrisy, I believe in this stuff, so I was trying to be a better dad to my kids, and you got to be around to do that. So for the next 2 years, I got things put in place so that when my first child went to school, I was going to be making enough money to pay those college bills. Right? And that entailed a little bit more travel. But I had one child at home who was going into high school, and as much as I wanted to be around, he didn't need me around as much as he might when he was 8. Right? He was starting to do his own things with his friends. He had his own academic pursuits. He had his own music pursuits. And so, no, I was not abandoning him, but I was able to spend a little bit more time outside the home making a living so that I could pay for college. Then all of a sudden, when he graduated high school, I had 2 kids in college. And so knowing that was going to happen, one of my goals was, okay, I'm going to have to for me to make the money I need to make to pay for 2 college educations, I'm going to have to be flexible enough to go do some travel and work outside of where I normally work. My wife was not worried about it. She was glad that I could help pay for college, and she was also probably tired of all of us boys being around. She kind of liked having mama time by herself. And so, but we also planned our own marriage around that we knew that when I was out of town, we did these things, but when I was in town, we really capitalized on our time together. Right? Made sure we weren't doing other things while we were together, and if we needed to do independent things, we tried to do that when we were apart. Those were goals that we had. We had to set that. If not, you go into survival mode. And so all of those goals can work out, right? And even now with this pandemic, I've had to set new goals because I can't travel a whole lot. And so I've done more on video. I've done more lives. I've done more things because I still have to make a living, but I want to do this. I've got one child that's married, one child that's dating a young lady. Well, what does that mean for us? Well, we may have grandbabies on the way. Well, we want to be around for grandbabies, so I'm going to be healthy. But also, when the grandbabies come, we may not want to go do some things. So we're doing a lot of things on our own that we want to do right now because we want to be available for grandchildren. That's just a goal. You just have to know what's going on. You don't want to wake up one day and go, man, we're not in the health that we need to be. We're not, I want to be around for my grandkids at least till the time they get married, at least till the time they graduate, if not longer than that. I'd love to see great-grandchildren. Well, then my goal is to be healthy enough to do that. Well, then my daily habits are I got to eat better and I got to exercise. I've got to do some stuff that makes me healthier. And so all of these things come into play. So I'm talking about kids as adults, but we also had to have goals, and we didn't always live by them, but we had to have goals when they were 1. We had to have goals when they were 5. We planned on where we were going to live, and it took a while to get there, but we made certain concessions and certain things to do, and we made certain sacrifices, right? So they could do that. And so think about, what are the monthly goals that you have for your kid? What do you want them to accomplish? I want them to learn to pick up their toys or learn to make up their bed. Our kids, when they were 10, we made sure they knew how to do their own laundry because we wanted them to have lots of practice before they became independent, right? We didn't want them to learn how to do laundry while they were away at college. And so what are your monthly goals for your kids? And then that means, what are our weekly goals? We need to make sure every week that we're getting all our homework turned in, that we're not eating junk food all the time, that we're eating some healthy meals, that we're spending time reading, that we're doing chores, whatever it is you want for your kids. And then if those are your weekly goals, what does that mean has to happen daily? Well, we got to get them in bed so they're not so cranky in the morning, so we have a good transition when we go to school or go to work, right? Or what are the daily routines? And they got to get up. The pandemic and shutdown has really cost some people because we're not going to school, so we're not going to get up early, and then all of a sudden the kids are getting up at 11, and it just makes for a horrible day. And a lot of families had to learn, you know what, we need a routine, we need a habit, because this is the way we're going to do it. And then think about, what are our goals? Are our goals specific? Are they measurable? I want them to be a really good piano player. Okay, what does that mean for a 7-year-old? How are you going to measure that? And so what are your goals? And go back to saying, so now I know I want them to play this piece of music, and I'm going to have somebody that knows what they're talking about tell me that they can play it well, that they've mastered it. But is that something a kid that's 8, 9, 10 years old can do? Is that achievable? Is it realistic? And is it timely? Is that the piece of music they need to master right now? Do my children need to know how to build a house from the ground up when they're 12? No. Do they need to know how to do their own laundry? Yeah. Do they need to know how to maybe paint? That'd be great. Do they need to know how to put a nail in a board? Yeah, that's probably a pretty good skill for both boys and girls to learn. Is it time for them to drive? Well, yeah, they can drive, but but then they need to know how to learn to change the tire. Right? Every little thing has these things that are achievable. So think about, where is your child now? Where do you want them in a year? What does that mean for all these things going backwards? Where is your child going to be in 5 years? What does that mean for them? And then what does that mean for you? I strongly, strongly, strongly suggest that you go to strongfathers.net vision. It doesn't cost anything. We're not asking for emails. It's just a straight ahead form that you can fill out. And I promise you, it will wake you up. Hopefully it scares you a little bit, but mainly it gets you to think about what you're doing with your kids and how that's going to inform your parenting and how that's going to help you get your kid going in the direction you want them to go. And so I appreciate you hanging out with us today, watching this lesson. Hopefully it makes sense to you. We're going to be doing lessons at least once a week, and so make sure you subscribe to that. Let me go back to that. There we go. We just faded out. And so subscribe to this, and then every time we put up a new video, whether it's live or not, you'll get it. And so subscribe. We'll get you more information. We'll get to do this. But check that out. Also, you can go to StrongFathers.TV/PH to watch all of these lessons, 1 through 7 now. And we'd love to get your input. We're still checking on those lessons, even though we've already posted them. We'd love to get your input, love to get your comments. Does this work for you? What else can we talk about? How else can we teach you? Because we really want to give you the opportunity to have this dialogue, right? Like right now, this is just a one-way street. You're having to listen to me, and hopefully this is valuable content for you. This is something that's helping you think about your parenting. And I would invite you to start with lesson 1, and we talk about what kind of adult do you want your child to become? What kind of vision are you setting? And then we got a lot more specific today. But in between that, we talked about the strengths of moms. What is mom's role? What is mom's perspective? What are the strengths of dads? What is dad's role? What are dad's strengths? What is his perspective? And then how do they work together? We talked about this constant negotiation that we should be doing as parents. It's really good. And constant negotiation is tough. It's one of the hardest parts of parenting, but it's one of the most important things we can do. So I'd invite you to look at that lesson as well. And then we talked very specifically about fathers. We're called Strong Fathers TV for a reason. And what fathers do to help their child get the best education. And I believe all of us, moms and dads, know that education is important for our kids to become successful. Now, I believe all of us have a different definition of success. Our kids will have a different definition of success than we do. But what I know about education, whether it's a college education or whatever it may be, the more education a kid gets, the more opportunities they have. If they've got a college diploma or if they've got postgraduate work, they just get more and more opportunities the more education they get. Somebody that doesn't have a basic education can only do so many things. It doesn't mean they don't have tremendous potential, but we know that it limits their opportunities. Whereas when you get that secondary education, then you get your post-secondary education, then you even get postgraduate education. All of those things give you more opportunity. People have to decide, do I care about that much opportunity or I just want to go do what I want to do? Go do what you want to do. But for our kids, we need to make sure that we give them the most that we can give them. Because I say that when we do our job as moms and dads, then we're helping our child reach their highest potential. Do kids make it with mediocre parents? Kids make it with bad parents. Kids make it with traumatic parenting experiences. But that's not what we want for our kids. What we want for our kids is we want for them to be able to reach their highest potential, whatever that may be. My highest potential will not be playing in the National Basketball Association. I can't shoot, I can't dribble, I can't run, and I'm 5'7". My highest potential is maybe playing in a rec league with guys older than me, really with bad legs, right? That's my highest potential in basketball. But my highest potential is I still have languages to learn, I still have people to reach out to, and so I want to do that. But I have that opportunity because of things that have been given to me before, because of the path that was set even by my own parents, right? And so think about, where do you want your kid to go? What does that mean step by step by step? And so how are you going to get to step 1? Like I said earlier, so many times we're at step 10. No, you're just going to frustrate yourself and you're going to frustrate your kid. Where do you want them to end up? Back that out from year to year to year to year. And so what does that mean we need to do this year? For our children to become accomplished adults, for them to become independent adults. Why am I talking about sweeping and doing laundry and learning skills? Because that's how they're going to be independent. Who's going to teach them those skills? I think it should be us. I think it really should be us as fathers. And so make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel right here. That way you'll get all the updates. Check us out, StrongFathers.TV/PH. We'll get you all of these lessons. And again, we'd love to hear your comments, love to have you on. And then let us know, how else can we serve you? What else do you want to know? Because we've got lots of things we can share, lots of things we can talk about in parenting, but we want to make sure we're doing the best job for you because we know you're wanting to do the best job as a parent. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in Lesson 8.